Elena Ramos adjusted the lace veil over her head one last time, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. The wedding gown clung perfectly to her frame, shimmering softly in the morning sunlight that filtered through the hotel suite. Today was supposed to mark the beginning of forever. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. Every detail had been planned meticulously, the flowers, the music, even the seating arrangement. Nothing was left to chance. Ryan Ramos, her husband-to-be, entered the room, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and his skin gleamed with the faint tan of someone who spent mornings jogging along the coast. He paused for a moment at the threshold, taking in her figure with a soft smile. "You look incredible," he said, his voice low and sincere. Elena smiled, her eyes bright with excitement. "We made it," she whispered. The ceremony was held at a seaside chapel, whitewashed and adorned with delicate orchids. The scent of salt mingled with the perfume of fresh flowers, creating a heady, almost intoxicating atmosphere. Guests whispered compliments, and photographers captured each fleeting expression. Every face smiled, every handshake seemed genuine. It was perfect, too perfect. As the vows were exchanged, Elena felt a surge of emotion. She had imagined this moment countless times. Her hand in his, the words flowing from her lips, the quiet joy in Ryan's eyes. "I promise to love you," he said, "through everything, for all our days." She repeated the words, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The ocean outside shimmered like liquid glass, and she believed in every syllable. The reception followed at the hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished floors. Laughter echoed across tables decorated with ivory linens and pale roses. Ryan leaned close to Elena as they danced their first waltz. "We're going to be so happy," he murmured. Elena rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the rhythm of the music and the heartbeat beneath his chest. "Forever, right?" she asked softly. "Forever," he confirmed, but even in this perfection tiny fissures appeared, almost imperceptible. Ryan's gaze occasionally drifted to the entrance, where a few late arrivals had yet to settle in. His phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, and he glanced at it with a subtle frown before tucking it away. Elena noticed but said nothing, dismissing it as the stress of a busy day. As the night wore on, Elena mingled with friends and family, smiling at their congratulations. She watched Ryan chat with an unfamiliar woman near the bar, laughing at something whispered in her ear. The moment lasted only seconds, but it planted a seed, a fleeting discomfort she chose to ignore. After all, today was about love, about trust, about the promise of a life together. By the time the last toast was made, the couple was ushered into a suite overlooking the ocean. The city lights glimmered in the distance, reflecting off the waves below. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, holding Ryan's hand tightly. "This is our beginning," she said, her voice steady. Ryan smiled, squeezing her hand. "Yes, our perfect beginning." And yet, beneath that calm smile, Elena couldn't shake the faintest unease, a shadow of uncertainty that whispered of secrets waiting just beyond the horizon. She pressed her forehead to his chest, inhaling his familiar scent, telling herself the day had been flawless, but perfection, she would soon learn, was a fragile illusion. The laughter that once filled their seaside apartment had grown faint, replaced by the low hum of the ceiling fan and the rhythmic tick of a clock that seemed to mock Elena's sleepless nights. Only 9 days had passed since the wedding, yet the warmth that once radiated between her and Ryan now felt like a performance she could no longer keep up. She told herself it was exhaustion, that every marriage stumbled through its first weeks, but deep down she knew something was off. It began subtly. Ryan started staying late at work, claiming last-minute client calls and emergency meetings that seemed to stretch longer each night. His tone had changed too, polite, careful, the way people sound when they're hiding something and hoping you won't notice. Elena tried to convince herself she was imagining it. She even laughed when he joked about her being too clingy, but that laugh felt forced, hollow, and sharp in her throat. One night, After another lonely dinner for two that ended with only one plate being touched, she heard it, his phone buzzing against the marble counter at nearly midnight. The sound was soft but insistent. Ryan was in the shower humming a tune that didn't match his usual calm. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the phone. The screen lit up with a name she didn't recognize, S, followed by a heart. Her chest tightened. For a long moment she just stared, frozen between the urge to open the message and the fear of what it might reveal. She placed the phone back down before the light dimmed, retreating to the couch like someone backing away from a snake. When Ryan came out, water dripping from his hair, she pretended to be asleep. She listened as he picked up the phone, whispered something under his breath, and quietly left the room. The faint sound of the balcony door sliding open told her everything she needed to know. The next few nights followed the same pattern: late hours, secret calls, and that same soft laugh he used to reserve for her. Once she woke to hear his voice through the wall, low and intimate. "I'll see you soon, babe," he said, his tone tender, unguarded. The word babe hit her like a blade. Elena sat in the dark, staring at their wedding photograph on the dresser. She remembered how he'd kissed her forehead that day, whispering promises of forever. Now the memory felt cruel. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized, eyes tired, lips trembling, a shadow of the bride who once believed love could save her. By morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She brewed his coffee, smiled when he mentioned a long day ahead, and kissed his cheek before he left. But her mind no longer trusted his voice. Every word he spoke now carried a hidden meaning. Every glance felt like a performance. That night, when the phone buzzed again, she didn't touch it. She only watched as Ryan stepped outside, the glow from the screen lighting his face in the darkness. From where she sat, she could see his smile, the same one that had once made her fall in love. Only now, it belonged to someone else. Elena turned off the lights, allowing the darkness to swallow her whole. The hum of the fan blended with the soft echo of Ryan's laughter drifting through the open balcony. For the first time since the wedding, she felt something inside her shift. Not pain, not sadness, but a quiet certainty that love was about to turn into something far more dangerous. And as the clock struck midnight, her phone lit up with a notification from a number she didn't know. "You deserve to know the truth." Elena couldn't shake the message from her mind. "You deserve to know the truth." The words glowed on her screen for hours that night, taunting her with possibilities. She never replied, but she didn't delete it either. It became a haunting whisper in her thoughts, a promise that her suspicions weren't just paranoia. By morning, Ryan was gone again, leaving a note that read, "Meeting with investors in the city." Back late, it was the fourth time that week. Elena stood at the window watching the ocean beyond their apartment shimmer beneath the rising sun. The beauty of it mocked her. Her hands clenched around the note until it tore in half. The phone buzzed again that afternoon. Another unknown number, another message. "Cafe Luna, 7 p.m. if you want to see for yourself." She sat frozen for nearly an hour, debating whether it was a cruel prank or a trap. But something in her gut, a deep, burning instinct, told her this was the moment she had been waiting for. When the clock neared 7, Elena wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the humid night. The city was alive with the sound of traffic and distant laughter. Every step toward Cafe Luna felt heavier than the last. The cafe was tucked at the corner of a quiet street, small but elegant, its glass walls glowing softly under the streetlight. Through them she saw him. Ryan sat at a corner table, his back slightly hunched, laughter spilling easily from his lips. Across from him sat a woman, slender, poised, her dark hair falling in smooth waves over her shoulders. The woman wore a red dress, the color of temptation and danger, her hand resting lightly over Ryan's. Elena froze. For a heartbeat, she thought she might faint. The sound of her pulse drowned out the street noise. She pressed herself against the wall hidden in the shadows, watching them through the glass like a ghost staring into the life she thought was hers. Ryan leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from the woman's face. Elena saw the way his eyes softened, the way his smile deepened. It was the same look he used to give her. before the lies, before the betrayal. The woman laughed, a low musical sound that seemed to slice through the night. Elena couldn't hear their words, but she didn't need to. The intimacy in their gestures told her everything. She pulled out her phone, snapping a photo through the glass, hands trembling. The flash accidentally flickered for an instant. Ryan's head jerked up. Their eyes met, just for a second. Panic surged through her. She turned away quickly, blending into the passing crowd before he could follow. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she hurried down the street, heart hammering. The city lights blurred in her vision, tears spilling freely now. By the time she reached home, her body felt numb. She collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the photo on her phone. Ryan's hand over the woman's, the red dress, the laughter. It was undeniable now. Hours passed in silence. Outside, thunder rumbled and rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows. Elena sat motionless, phone still in her hand. She played the wedding video on her laptop, Ryan smiling, promising love and faithfulness for all their days. The irony burned through her chest. As the rain intensified, she whispered to the empty room, "You promised me forever." Her voice cracked, but her eyes hardened. The clock struck midnight again, echoing like a warning bell. From somewhere deep inside her, a plan began to form, fragile at first, then sharper with every passing thought. If love could lie so beautifully, then truth would have to bleed to be seen. And when the storm outside quieted, Elena finally smiled, a small, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. The morning after the storm, the city glistened beneath a thin film of rain. Elena stood by the window, watching the world come back to life as though nothing had happened. But inside her, something had died quietly in the night. The moment she saw that red dress, something irreversible cracked open. A quiet shift from heartbreak to something darker, calmer, and far more dangerous. Ryan returned home that afternoon, his shirt damp, his smile practiced. He kissed her cheek like nothing had changed. "Traffic was hell," he muttered, tossing his keys on the counter. Elena nodded, her face unreadable. She didn't mention the cafe. She didn't mention the woman. She just poured him coffee and watched the steam rise between them like a ghost. That was the beginning of her silence. For 9 days, she said nothing. No questions, no accusations. Just quiet smiles, measured words, and eyes that lingered a little too long. Ryan mistook her calm for forgiveness. He didn't see that she was studying him, memorizing every lie, every small hesitation, every late-night phone call muffled by the sound of running water. At night, she lay awake beside him, eyes open in the dark. His breathing was steady, peaceful. Sometimes he mumbled in his sleep, and once she swore she heard another name leave his lips. Her nails dug into her palm, but she didn't move. She simply turned her head and stared at the ceiling until the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. By the 4th day, she began writing again, small notes in her leather-bound journal, the one Ryan thought she had abandoned. Her handwriting grew uneven, frantic. "He doesn't see me anymore. She wears my perfume. 9 days? Maybe that's how long love takes to rot," she wrote until her hands cramped, then tucked the journal away beneath her pillow, as though keeping her pain close could stop it from spilling out. Ryan continued living in his carefully crafted illusion. He talked about business trips and dinner meetings, about clients she had never met. He laughed easily, played music while shaving, and texted someone when he thought she wasn't looking. The lies came so naturally now that she almost admired him for it. By the 7th day, Elena began rehearsing her words. In front of the mirror, she whispered them under her breath. "Do you love her? Was I ever enough?" Each time she spoke, her reflection looked back at her with eyes colder than before. The apartment, once filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of laughter, now felt like a waiting room before an inevitable end. Even the ocean outside seemed quieter, as if holding its breath with her. On the 8th night, Ryan brought home white roses, the same flowers he gave her on their wedding day. "For my beautiful wife," he said, pressing them into her hands. The gesture almost broke her. She smiled, thanked him softly, and placed the flowers in a vase. When he wasn't looking, she plucked one petal off and let it fall into the sink, watching it swirl down the drain. That night, she sat by the window again, the journal open on her lap. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she was grieving her marriage or the person she used to be. On the 9th day, she looked at him across the breakfast table. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The silence between them was sharp enough to cut through glass. Ryan smiled uneasily. "You're quiet lately." Elena's lips curved faintly. "Just thinking." He laughed, not realizing she wasn't lying, because by the end of that day, her thoughts would no longer be words on paper. They would become action. The morning began with an eerie calm. The rain had stopped, and the sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, turning the apartment's walls a pale gold. Elena moved quietly, setting the table for breakfast as if it were any other day. But the weight in her chest had grown unbearable. 9 days of silence had fermented into something volatile. Today it would spill. Ryan walked in, whistling softly, scrolling through his phone. "You're up early," he said, grabbing a slice of toast without looking at her. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and his voice carried the easy rhythm of a man who believed everything was fine. Elena watched him for a long moment. "We should talk," she said, her tone steady, almost too calm. He looked up, frowning slightly. "Now I'm late for a meeting," she tilted her head. "Is that what you told her too?" The question landed like glass shattering. Ryan froze. "What are you talking about?" Elena stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Cafe Luna," she whispered. "The woman in the red dress. I saw you." For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Ryan blinked, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "You followed me?" He scoffed. "Elena, that's insane." Her laughter came out low, trembling at first, then stronger. "Insane? You cheat on me, and I'm insane?" She shook her head, her smile bitter. "You're good, Ryan. You almost had me believing you again." Ryan set his phone down, his voice rising. "You're twisting everything." "Sabrina is just a client. Don't lie," she cut in, her voice sharper now. "You called her babe in your sleep." That stopped him. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. "You've been listening to me while I sleep?" "God, Elena, do you hear yourself?" She stepped closer, the distance between them vanishing. "I hear everything now. Every word, every secret you thought I was too naive to notice?" Ryan turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You're making something out of nothing. You've always been too emotional." "Too—" The sound of her hand striking his face silenced the sentence. The slap echoed through the apartment. He stood stunned, one hand against his cheek, eyes wide. Elena's breathing was uneven, but her gaze didn't waver. "Don't you dare call me emotional," she said softly. "You don't get to define my pain." Ryan's voice cracked with anger. "You've lost it, Elena. Maybe you need help." Her laugh was cold, almost hollow. "Maybe I do, but not the kind you think." He grabbed his jacket, moving toward the door. "I can't do this right now." As he turned, Elena's voice stopped him mid-step. "Does she make you happy?" He hesitated, back still turned. "This isn't about happiness," he muttered. "Then what is it about?" She asked. "What was I missing?" Ryan didn't answer. The door slammed behind him, leaving her alone in the echo. The sound reverberated through her chest like a final verdict. Elena stood motionless for several minutes. Then, slowly, she walked to the counter, where their wedding photo still sat in its silver frame. She picked it up, tracing his face with her fingertip. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her, eyes hollow. Mouth tight, a stranger, she whispered, "You said forever." Then she placed the frame face down. Outside, the wind began to pick up again, carrying with it the scent of salt from the ocean. The world felt heavy, paused between calm and catastrophe. Elena turned toward the kitchen, where a single white rose from his last bouquet had begun to wilt in its vase. She plucked the dying flower out, its petals soft against her palm, and whispered, "It's time." For the first time in days, her silence broke, not in words, but in resolve. The house felt different after the fight. The air hung thick with unspoken words. and every sound seemed to echo. The creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the soft clink of dishes as Elena cleaned up what was left of the morning. Ryan hadn't come home that night, and part of her hoped he wouldn't come back at all. But when dawn broke, his car appeared in the driveway, gleaming in the sunlight as if nothing had happened. He entered quietly, avoiding her eyes. "Didn't want to wake you," he murmured, loosening his tie. Elena only nodded, her voice trapped somewhere between rage and exhaustion. She had no energy left to argue. Yet beneath that quiet exterior, her mind was awake, calculating, watching, memorizing. Ryan showered, changed, and left again within an hour, muttering something about urgent business. As soon as the door shut, Elena's composure cracked. She went to his study, the one he kept locked, and retrieved the spare key he thought she didn't know about. Her pulse raced as she opened the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cologne and dust. On the desk sat neatly stacked folders, an open laptop, and a photograph of him and Sabrina, smiling, carefree, their faces inches apart. Elena stared at it, her throat tight, the edges of her vision blurring. Beneath the photo lay a receipt, 2 plane tickets to Cebu, dated for next week. She sank into the chair, the paper trembling in her hands. They were leaving. He wasn't just having an affair. He was planning a life without her. For a long time, she didn't move. The ticking clock filled the silence. Her mind traveled backward, years before Ryan, to the woman she used to be. She had grown up under the shadow of her mother's warnings. Never trust love that comes too easily. Her mother, a bitter woman hardened by betrayal, had taught her that love was survival, not emotion. Elena had hated that lesson. She'd promised herself she would be different. But sitting there now, staring at those tickets, she finally understood what her mother meant. Love, when built on lies, was just another kind of cruelty. The sound of a car horn outside snapped her back. She quickly closed the laptop and slipped the tickets into her pocket. She needed air. Down the street, the ocean shimmered under the late morning sun. The waves rolled against the rocks with a calm rhythm that mocked her turmoil. She sat on the bench overlooking the water, trying to steady her breathing. From a distance, she must have looked peaceful. Inside, she was breaking apart in perfect silence. A voice startled her. "Rough morning?" She turned. It was Detective Morales, an old acquaintance of her late father. He was tall, weathered, his kind eyes observant but patient. They'd spoken a few times since the wedding. Casual greetings, nothing more. Elena forced a smile. "You could say that." He studied her face for a moment. "You okay, Elena? You look tired." She nodded. "Just not sleeping much." Morales hesitated, then said softly, "If you ever need to talk about anything at all, you can call me." "I know your father would have wanted that." She thanked him, but her mind was elsewhere. As he walked away, her gaze drifted back to the sea. Beneath its calm surface lay unseen depths, cold, silent, endless. When she returned home, Ryan's cologne still lingered in the air. She opened the drawer where she'd hidden the tickets and stared at them again. Her reflection in the glass pane above the desk looked almost serene. But her eyes betrayed her. If Ryan thought he could bury the truth, he had forgotten something important. Elena had learned how to dig. That night, Elena sat in the dim light of her bedroom, the sound of waves faint through the open window. The plane tickets rested on the nightstand beside her, a reminder of the life Ryan was preparing to escape to, a life that didn't include her. Every time she looked at them, her pulse quickened, a mixture of hurt and something darker beginning to bloom inside her. By morning, she had made her decision. Whatever Ryan was hiding, she would uncover it completely, and she would do it with the same precision he used to deceive her. When Ryan came downstairs, freshly shaven and pretending as though the past few days hadn't fractured everything between them, Elena smiled, soft, practiced, almost believable. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone light. "Maybe we need a fresh start. Just us. How about dinner tomorrow? The oceanfront place you love." Ryan blinked, surprised by her calm. Then, as if he'd found a reason to relax, he smiled back. "That sounds perfect." As soon as he left for work, Elena picked up her phone and called the number on the card Detective Morales had given her. He answered immediately. "Elena, everything all right?" "I just need to ask you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If someone were hiding something, travel plans, maybe another relationship, could you find out where they've been?" There was a pause. Morales' voice softened. "You don't have to tell me details, but yes, I can look into it. Thank you," she said. "And please, don't tell anyone you spoke to me." After the call, Elena returned to Ryan's study. She opened his laptop, this time using the password she'd guessed from his favorite date, their anniversary. The screen unlocked instantly. Inside his email drafts, she found messages to Sabrina. They weren't love notes exactly. They were logistics, plans, coded exchanges, but one stood out. "Dinner first. Then we talk about the transfer. Don't forget the file." The message was dated for the same day she had invited him out. She leaned back, the weight of realization crashing over her. This wasn't just an affair, it was business. Something secret, something dangerous enough to hide. That evening, while preparing for their dinner, Elena rehearsed her lines like an actress. Her movements were deliberate, calm, even affectionate. She wore the soft blue dress Ryan once said made her eyes look brighter. But underneath the calm facade, her mind raced through every detail. When Ryan returned home, he seemed at ease. "You look beautiful," he said, brushing a kiss against her cheek. "Thank you," she murmured. "I thought tonight could be special." They drove to the restaurant as the sun dipped below the horizon, the ocean reflecting streaks of gold and red. Elena watched him in the fading light, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he could feel her watching him, if he sensed the shift in her silence. At dinner, Ryan talked about work, about the upcoming week. He avoided her eyes when she mentioned the beach trip they'd once planned. Then, just as dessert arrived, his phone buzzed. He reached for it quickly, but she'd already seen the name flash on the screen. "Sabrina." Her chest tightened. "Who's that?" she asked softly. Ryan froze, just for a second too long. "Work," he said, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." Elena smiled back, a mirror of his lie. "Of course." They finished dinner in silence. On the drive home, she stared out at the dark waves breaking against the shore. She didn't ask any more questions. She didn't need to. When they reached home, Ryan went straight to his study. Elena waited until she heard the door close before pulling the tickets from her purse. She placed them on his desk beside his laptop, perfectly aligned, impossible to miss. Upstairs, she poured herself a glass of wine and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Tomorrow would bring answers, or destruction. Either way, the game had begun. The next evening arrived with a deceptive calm. The ocean breeze drifted through the open window as Elena stood before her vanity, fastening the clasp of her necklace. The same soft blue dress from the night before hung loosely against her frame. She had barely slept, yet her reflection looked composed, almost serene. Behind that composure, her heart beat with quiet defiance. Ryan had said he had another business dinner tonight. His tone had been casual, even careless, as though the previous night's tension had evaporated into thin air. But Elena knew better. She had checked his calendar, seen the name scribbled in faint pencil, Sabrina, 7 p.m., the Coral Room. By 6:30, Elena was already driving. The sun was sinking, painting the streets in burnt gold. As she neared the ocean front, her stomach churned with something sharp and cold. Not jealousy, not even heartbreak, but purpose. She parked across the street from the restaurant and waited. At exactly 7, Ryan arrived, stepping out of his car with a calm arrogance that used to charm her. Minutes later, Sabrina appeared, a striking woman in a red dress that caught every glimmer of light. Elena's breath hitched. The woman from her nightmares was real, standing just feet away, smiling up at her husband. They walked inside together, laughing. The sound felt like a blade twisting in Elena's chest. Elena waited another 10 minutes before entering. The hostess greeted her warmly, unaware of the storm brewing beneath her calm expression. "Table for one?" Elena smiled faintly. "Actually, I think my friends are already here. Ryan and Sabrina." The hostess checked the list, then nodded. "Right this way." The choral room was intimate. Low lighting, soft jazz, and the smell of salt and citrus. As the hostess led her through the maze of tables, Elena caught sight of them near the back, seated in a cozy corner. Ryan's hand rested over Sabrina's. The hostess stopped. "Here you are." Ryan looked up and froze. His face drained of color. Sabrina blinked, her smile faltering. "Surprise," Elena said softly, sliding into the third chair. "I hope you don't mind. I thought we could all eat together. It's been too long since I've met your business partner." The silence that followed was thick enough to suffocate. Ryan cleared his throat. "Elena, this isn't business," she interrupted, eyes locked on him. "Because it certainly doesn't look like it." Sabrina shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should—" "No," Elena said, turning to her with unsettling calm. "Please stay. I'd love to hear what you two have been planning." "Cebu, was it?" Ryan's hand twitched. "Where did you—" Elena leaned forward. "You left the receipts in your office. You really should be more careful." Sabrina's eyes darted between them. "Ryan, you said, 'Enough!'" he snapped. But his voice trembled. For the next several minutes, the restaurant faded into background noise. Words flew, accusations, half-truths, feigned innocence. But through it all, Elena remained eerily composed. Each question she asked was sharp, deliberate, designed to wound. Ryan stumbled over excuses. Sabrina's composure cracked entirely. When the waiter approached, uncertain, Elena smiled at him. "We'll have 3 glasses of your best red, please." The wine arrived. None of them touched it. Finally, Elena stood. "I just wanted to see it for myself," she said quietly. "The faces of the people who turned my life into a lie." She looked at Ryan one last time, his jaw tight, his pride shattered, and then at Sabrina, whose tears glistened under the dim light. "Enjoy your dinner," she whispered, turning away. Outside, the night air hit her like a wave. She didn't cry. She didn't even look back. She walked toward her car with the calm of someone who had already made her decision. Behind her, inside the restaurant, Ryan buried his face in his hands. Sabrina whispered something he couldn't hear. The world outside was silent, save for the ocean and the faint echo of a door closing, soft, final, and absolute. The morning after the dinner, the small coastal town seemed quieter than usual, as though the sea itself sensed something dark settling over it. The choral room was still closed when the first wave of whispers began. Someone had seen Ryan's car parked outside his office long past midnight. Another claimed he'd stormed out of the restaurant after an argument. By sunrise, no one had seen him, or Sabrina. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. The faint smell of salt water drifted in through the window, mingling with the sterile scent of the house. Everything felt staged, too neat, too silent. She'd returned home late the previous night, her mind a storm of images. Ryan's pale face, Sabrina's trembling hands, the untouched glasses of red wine glinting like spilled blood in the candlelight. Now, all she felt was exhaustion and an eerie calm. Her phone vibrated against the table. A text from Ryan's business partner. "Is Ryan with you? He didn't show up this morning." Elena stared at the message, unreadable. She typed slowly, "No. Haven't seen him since dinner." For hours, she moved through the house like a ghost, straightening things that weren't crooked, wiping counters that were already spotless. Every sound, a dripping faucet, a creaking floorboard, made her flinch. But she told herself this was relief, not fear. She had confronted them. She had walked away. Whatever came next wasn't her burden anymore. By afternoon, police cars appeared along the highway. 2 officers came to the door. Elena greeted them with quiet politeness. "Mrs. Ramos?" one asked, flipping open a small notepad. "We're looking for your husband, Ryan Ramos. He's been reported missing." Her eyes widened in practiced disbelief. "Missing? Since when?" "Since last night," the officer said. "He was last seen leaving the choral room around 10:30. His car was found near the old pier this morning. Keys still in the ignition." Elena's breath caught, the perfect measure of shock. "Oh my God." "The pier?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you have any idea why he might have gone there?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. No, we argued, that's all. About his work. He left angry, but I thought he'd gone to clear his head. The officers exchanged glances. And the woman he was with? Elena blinked. Sabrina? She said softly, as if saying the name hurt. Was she with him? We're still looking into that, one replied. Her apartment's empty. Her phone was found in her car, not far from his. Elena's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God! When they finally left, she closed the door gently and leaned against it, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Her reflection in the hallway mirror stared back at her. Composed, pale, and unreadable, outside neighbors began whispering. Reporters arrived by evening, their questions slicing through the humid air. Cameras flashed. Elena played her part perfectly, the grieving wife, blindsided by her husband's vanishing act. But inside the house, hidden behind the linen closet, lay the one thing no one would ever find. The small red dress Sabrina had worn that night, folded neatly in a plastic bag. As night fell, Elena walked to the backyard, where the faint hum of the ocean carried through the palms. The moonlight shimmered across the waves, calm and endless. Somewhere out there, the pier jutted into darkness, a place where stories ended quietly, swallowed by the sea. She closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air. Tomorrow, the search would widen. The police would drag the waters, reporters would speculate, and everyone would pity her. But tonight, for the first time in days, she felt peace. A dark, heavy kind of peace that came only when the noise was gone, and far beyond the shore. Where the tide met the rocks, something glinted beneath the water, briefly catching the moonlight before vanishing again. The sea became the town's obsession. Every morning, boats drifted along the coast, their engines cutting through the mist, searching for what the ocean refused to return. The pier, once a place of quiet beauty, now swarmed with police tape, divers, and flashing cameras. Reporters huddled near the railing, shouting questions about the disappearance of Ryan Ramos and his mistress. The phrase echoed across every news channel like a haunting refrain. Elena watched it all unfold from her living room window. Her house overlooked the shoreline, the same stretch of water now being combed for answers. From this distance, it looked peaceful, blue, endless, deceptive. She sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Each passing wave felt like a whisper. Detective Manuel Ortega had taken over the investigation. He was calm, methodical, and sharp, a man who didn't believe in coincidences. He arrived at Elena's house 3 days after the pier discovery, holding a small notebook and a voice recorder. "Mrs. Ramos," he said politely, "I appreciate your cooperation. I just need to go over a few details again." Elena smiled faintly. "Of course, Detective. Anything I can do to help." He studied her face for a moment, then took a seat. "You said you last saw your husband at dinner, correct?" "Yes," she replied evenly. "At the Coral Room, he left angry. And you didn't see where he went?" She shook her head. "No, I came straight home." The detective leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "The waitress said you looked upset. That the table had tension." Elena let out a small, bitter laugh. "Tension? Detective, my husband was cheating on me. I think anyone would have looked upset." His pen paused above the paper. "You knew about the affair?" "I suspected it," she said softly. That night confirmed it. Ortega nodded, scribbling something in his notes. "We found both cars near the pier. No sign of struggle, no blood. Just tire marks leading toward the water. It's possible they drove off accidentally. The currents there are strong." Elena's gaze drifted toward the window, to the glimmering waves. "The ocean doesn't give back what it takes, Detective," she murmured. He studied her for a long moment, as though trying to decide if she meant it as philosophy or confession. "You seem calm, Mrs. Ramos. Most people wouldn't be." She met his gaze, eyes cold but steady. "I've had time to make peace with the truth." When he finally left, Elena exhaled slowly. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her cup down. For days she had rehearsed that calm. For days she had convinced herself that the sea would keep its promise. But that night, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the moonlit waves, she felt something shift in the air, something heavy and unfinished. The tide had receded lower than usual, revealing jagged rocks beneath the pier. A strange fear began to grow in her chest. What if the ocean decided to speak? What if the secrets she had buried beneath its surface began to rise? She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the dark water until the horizon blurred. The rhythmic crash of the waves began to sound less like music and more like a warning. Somewhere beyond the breakers, a fisherman's light bobbed faintly on the water. For a brief moment, Elena thought she saw something else near it, something pale drifting just below the surface. But when she blinked, it was gone. The next morning, the phone rang before sunrise. Detective Ortega's voice was firm, clipped, different. "Mrs. Ramos," he said, "we may have found something near the pier. I'm going to need you to come down here." Elena's hand tightened around the receiver, her pulse thudding in her ears. As she hung up and turned toward the window, the first rays of light struck the ocean. It looked calm again, indifferent, like it hadn't just betrayed her.